Jae-sung is standing in a hotel bathroom in Hong Kong, and his hands won't stop shaking. There's blood on his knuckles, not from a fight, but from gripping the sink so hard the porcelain cracked. And he's staring at a phone on the counter like it's a loaded gun. The screen shows a photo of Keisha and Maya at the beach, smiling, and underneath it, a text message in Korean. Quote, "You have 12 hours to decide who dies first." He's not crying, but his breath is shallow and his eyes are empty, and you can tell this is a man who has already lost. He picks up the phone, opens the contacts, scrolls to Keisha's name, and his thumb hovers over the call button for what feels like forever. Then he deletes her number. He deletes everything. He drops the phone in the toilet and watches it sink. Wait, how did we get here? We all knew how Jae-sung ended with a happily ever after with Keisha in part 1. I guess the story's just getting started, and what you knew about love and sacrifice is more expensive than freedom. 6 months earlier, Vietnam. A fishing village so small it doesn't have a name on Google Maps, just a dot on the coast where the boats come in before sunrise. Jae-sung is walking Maya to school, and he's carrying her backpack because she insists on holding his hand with both of hers, and this is the kind of life he never thought he'd have. He can't stop counting. He counts the motorbikes that pass, the number of faces he doesn't recognize, the seconds between when a car parks and when someone gets out. It's automatic, like breathing. And Keisha has noticed, but she doesn't say anything because she knows he's trying. He drops Maya off, kisses her forehead, watches her run inside, and then he stands there for 30 seconds longer than a normal father would because he's scanning the street for black sedans, for men in sunglasses, for anyone who looks like they don't belong. There's nothing. There's never anything. But he checks anyway. Jae-sung works in a boatyard now, sanding wood and patching hulls, and his boss is a 60-year-old Vietnamese man who speaks 3 words of English and pays him in cash. It's honest work, the kind that leaves splinters in your palms and makes your shoulders ache, and Jae-sung likes it because pain you earn is different from pain you inherit. But every day at 3:47 p.m., he stops whatever he's doing and checks his phone. Not for messages, there are never messages, but to open a browser, type a specific URL, and wait for a page to load. It's a server in Switzerland, password protected, and all it shows is a green checkmark. That checkmark means the files are still there, still encrypted, still his insurance policy. As long as that checkmark is green, Seoul can't touch him. Keisha doesn't know about this. She thinks he quit cold turkey, that he walked away clean, and he's never corrected her because the truth would ruin the illusion that they're safe. One afternoon, Jae-sung comes home early and finds an envelope on the kitchen table. No address, no stamp, just his name written in Hangul, Korean script, in handwriting he doesn't recognize. Keisha is in the shower, Maya's at a friend's house, and for a moment he considers throwing it away unopened because ignorance is the only kind of peace he has left. But he doesn't. He opens it. If you're listening right now, here's to remind you that we care about you and your support is much appreciated. Remember how we agreed to help me get to 1,000 subscribe by proving my mother wrong? She said nobody cares about stories where love and survival thrives through difficult situations. If any part of this made you think about the times you had to love or pay sacrifices that cost you, then subscribe. We're building a community that cares about you. Comment where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to remember that broken don't mean destroyed. Back to our story. Inside is a receipt from a cafe in Da Nang 3 days ago, and circled in red ink is a single line item: 2 iced Americanos. Jae-sung has never been to that cafe, but he knows what this means. Someone was watching him. Someone was close enough to know his coffee order, close enough to follow him, close enough to leave this as proof. He checks the locks. He checks the windows. He opens his phone and pulls up the Switzerland server, and the checkmark is still green. But now it feels different, not like safety, but like a countdown. That night, Jae-sung doesn't sleep. He sits in the dark with a kitchen knife in his lap, not because he thinks someone will break in, but because holding something sharp makes him feel like he has control. Keisha wakes up at 2 a.m., sees him sitting there and asks if he's okay, and he lies and says he couldn't sleep. She sits next to him, takes the knife gently out of his hands, and sets it on the table. She doesn't ask what's wrong because she's learned that pressing him only makes him retreat. Instead, she just leans her head on his shoulder and stays there until the sun comes up. And that's when Jae-sung realizes the choice he's been avoiding. If someone is coming for him, they'll come for her too. And if he runs, they'll follow. The only way to protect her is to stop running and face what he left behind. By morning, he's made a decision. He's going to Da Nang. He's going to find out who left that receipt. And depending on what he finds, he might have to become the man he swore he'd never be again. The question is, will Keisha forgive him when she finds out? Jae-sung tells Keisha he has to pick up supplies for the boatyard, which is half true because he does need marine-grade varnish. But the real reason he's driving 2 hours north is because he can't let this sit. The receipt is in his pocket, and every time the bus hits a pothole, he feels it there like a stone. He's running through scenarios in his head. Maybe it's a test. Maybe it's someone from the old crew checking if he's still sharp. Maybe it's just paranoia finally catching up to him. But the handwriting was deliberate. The circle around the coffee order was precise, and whoever left it wanted him to know they were close. The cafe is near the river, tucked between a tailor shop and a pharmacy, and when Jae-sung walks in, he realizes he's been here before. Not physically, but in memory. It's the kind of place expats use as a dead drop because it's busy enough to blend in, but small enough to notice who doesn't belong. He orders an iced Americano, even though he doesn't want one, just to see if anyone reacts. No one does, but when he sits down, there's already someone at his table. The man is older than Jae-sung remembers, maybe mid-50s now, with gray at his temples and a scar that runs from his left ear to his collarbone, the kind you get from a knife that was meant to go deeper. His name is Sung-ho, and he used to be Jae-sung's uncle's enforcer before the organization restructured and Sung-ho became expendable. Jae-sung's first instinct is to leave, but Sung-ho raises one hand in a gesture that's more tired than threatening and says in Korean, "Sit. I didn't come to hurt you." Jae-sung sits, but his hand stays near his waistband, even though he's not carrying, and Sung-ho notices and almost smiles. "You're still sharp. Good. You'll need to be." There's no small talk, no pretense of reunion. Sung-ho slides a phone across the table, an old Nokia, the kind you can't track, and tells Jae-sung to open the photo gallery. There are 3 pictures. The first is of a man Jae-sung used to know, a mid-level accountant who helped him encrypt the Switzerland files. The man is tied to a chair, his face swollen beyond recognition. The second photo is the same man, but worse. The third is just an empty chair with blood on the floor. Jae-sung doesn't flinch, but his jaw tightens, and Sung-ho sees it. They've been doing this for 2 months. Everyone who touched your operation, everyone who knew your real name. They're not asking nicely anymore. Sung-ho explains it like he's reading from a script, detached but precise. After Jae-sung disappeared, his uncle's empire didn't collapse immediately, it fractured. The Chinese partners pulled out, the Russians renegotiated terms, and the younger lieutenants started carving up territory like hyenas around a carcass. But the real power shift came when his uncle's rival, a man named Choi, took control of Seoul operations. Choi is methodical, Sung-ho says. He doesn't care about revenge or honor or any of the old world rules. He cares about leverage. And the Switzerland files, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the names of every politician and judge on the payroll, are the ultimate leverage. Whoever controls those files controls the remnants of the organization. And Choi has been systematically torturing anyone who might know where they are. Jae-sung keeps his face neutral, but inside he's calculating. The files are still encrypted, still locked behind a system that requires his biometric authentication to access. No one can crack them without him, which means Choi knows that, which means Choi isn't trying to steal the files, he's trying to draw Jae-sung out. Sung-ho leans back, lights a cigarette, even though the cafe has a no smoking sign, and says, "You think you're safe here. You think distance and a new name are enough. But Choi doesn't think like that. He thinks in concentric circles. He's not coming for you. He's coming for everyone around you until he comes to him." Jae-sung's voice is quiet when he asks, "Who does he have?" Sung-ho doesn't answer immediately. He takes a long drag, exhales slowly, and then slides another phone across the table, this one newer with a cracked screen. He unlocks it and shows Jae-sung a video. It's dated 4 days ago.
The video shows a woman in her early 30s, tied to a chair in what looks like a storage unit. Her face is bruised, but recognizable. It's Minso, Keisha's younger sister. She's a graduate student in Seoul, studying social work, and the last time Jae-sung saw her was at their wedding 2 years ago. She's crying in the video, not from pain, but from fear, and a voice off camera, calm, almost polite, asks her in Korean, "Do you know where your brother-in-law is?" She says no. She says it over and over. The voice doesn't believe her. The video cuts off. Jae-sung's hand is shaking now, not from fear, but from the sudden flood of adrenaline that used to come right before he made a decision he couldn't take back. He looks at Sung-ho and asks, "Why are you telling me this?" Sung-ho stubs out his cigarette. "Because Choi sent me to find you. He said if I brought you back, he'd let me walk away clean. But I've seen what he does to people who walk away, so I'm giving you a choice instead." "What choice?" "You come back to Seoul, hand over the files, and maybe he lets her go. Or you stay here, and in 2 weeks, she's in the second photo instead of the first." Jae-sung doesn't say anything for a long time. He's thinking about Keisha, about the way she looks at him when she thinks he's finally free, about Maya asking him last week if they could stay in Vietnam forever. He's thinking about the man he used to be, the one who could make decisions like this without hesitation, because the math was simple, survival over sentiment. But that man is gone, or at least buried, and now the math is impossible. If he goes back, he risks becoming the monster again. If he doesn't, someone innocent dies because of choices he made before he even met her. Sung-ho stands up, leaves the Nokia on the table, and says, "You have 3 days. After that, Choi stops being patient. The number's already programmed in. Call when you decide." He walks out, and Jae-sung sits there alone with 2 phones and a choice that feels like drowning. The cafe is still playing soft acoustic music. Outside, the river keeps moving, and somewhere in Seoul, a woman who did nothing wrong is waiting for a man she's never met to decide if her life is worth the cost of his. Jae-sung picks up the Nokia. He doesn't call yet, but he doesn't put it down either. This isn't just about Jae-sung anymore. The system he thought he escaped is reaching through the phone, through borders, through time, and it's grabbing the people he loves. And the only way to stop it might be to become the thing he swore he'd never be again. Jae-sung drives back from Da Nang in silence, and by the time he reaches the village, it's past midnight. The house is dark, except for the kitchen light, which means Keisha waited up, which means she knows something is wrong because he never stays out this late without calling. She's sitting at the table with a cup of tea that's gone cold, and when he walks in, she doesn't ask where he's been. She just looks at him in that way she has, the one that makes lying feel impossible. He sits down across from her, and for a long time, neither of them says anything. Finally, she asks, "Who was it?" He could deflect. He could say it was nothing, just an old friend passing through, just coincidence. But the weight of the Nokia in his pocket feels heavier than the lies he's been carrying for 6 months, and he realizes he's tired of pretending the past doesn't exist. So he tells her, not everything, but enough. He tells her about Sung-ho, about the files, about the insurance policy he thought would keep them safe, but instead painted a target on everyone he loves. He tells her about Minso, about the video, about the 3 days he has to decide. Keisha doesn't interrupt. She listens like she always does, with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes never leaving his face. And when he's finished, she takes a long breath and says, "So our life here, this whole thing, it was never real. It was just borrowed time."
He wants to argue, to tell her it was real, that the mornings with Maya and the nights with her and the calluses on his hands from honest work were all real. But he can't, because she's right. Everything they built was on a foundation of blackmail, and now the ground is cracking beneath them. Keisha stands up and walks to the window, her back to him, and for a moment Jae-sung thinks she's going to cry. But when she turns around, her eyes are dry and her voice is steady. And that's somehow worse. "What are you going to do?" she asks. He doesn't hesitate. "I'm going to end it." "How?" "The way I used to." She shakes her head slowly, and there's something in her expression that's not anger or fear, but disappointment, and it cuts deeper than anything Choi could do to him. "You mean violence?" "I mean solving the problem. By killing people." He doesn't deny it, because that's exactly what he means. He's already run through the logistics in his head. Choi is in Seoul, probably surrounded by security, but Jae-sung knows the old safe houses, the patterns, the weaknesses. He could be in and out in 48 hours if he moves fast and doesn't hesitate. He's done it before, he can do it again. But Keisha steps closer, and her voice drops to something quieter and more dangerous. "If you kill for us, you bring the Mafia into this house. You bring it into Maya's bedroom. You bring it into every meal we eat and every word we say. I won't raise my kids in a graveyard." "So what do you want me to do? Let them kill your sister?" "I want you to find another way." "There is no other way." "Then make one." They don't sleep that night. Jae-sung sits on the floor of the living room with his back against the couch, and Keisha sits across from him with her knees pulled to her chest, and they talk in circles for hours. She keeps asking if there's a way to negotiate, to hand over the files without walking into a trap, to involve authorities or intermediaries or anyone who isn't a killer. He keeps explaining why none of that will work. Choi doesn't negotiate. The authorities in Seoul are already on the payroll. Intermediaries get tortured for information. The only language the organization understands is force, and the only currency they respect is fear. But Keisha won't let it go. She tells him about the man she fell in love with, the one who sat in her clinic 2 years ago and couldn't perform, but could still cry. The one who proved strength isn't about violence, it's about the courage to be vulnerable. She tells him that if he goes back to killing, he'll lose the part of himself that makes him worth saving. And Jae-sung knows she's right. He knows that if he crosses that line again, something will break inside him that won't heal. But he also knows that if he doesn't, Min-soo dies, and Keisha will never forgive him, and the guilt will hollow him out just as surely as the violence would. So he offers a compromise, even though it feels like surrender. There's a neutral zone. Hong Kong. I'll contact Choi and offer to hand over the files there. Public place, witnesses, no weapons. Keisha looks at him like she's trying to read the future in his face. "You think he'll go for that?" "No, but I think I can make the trade without anyone getting hurt." "You're lying." "I'm trying." The next morning, Jae-sung makes the call. The Nokia has one number programmed, and when he dials it, Sung-ho picks up on the second ring. Jae-sung doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He says he'll hand over the files in Hong Kong, neutral territory, and in exchange, Min-soo walks free, and Choi leaves his family alone. Sung-ho is quiet for a moment, then says, "Choi doesn't do neutral. He'll send people, and they won't be there to shake hands." "I know. So why are you doing this?" "Because my wife asked me to." Sung-ho almost laughs, but it comes out bitter. "You're going to die for a woman who doesn't understand the game?" "Maybe, but at least I'll die human." The line goes dead. Jae-sung books a flight for the next day. He tells Keisha he'll be back in 72 hours, and she nods but doesn't believe him, and they both know it. That night, Jae-sung sits with Maya while she does her homework, and he helps her sound out English words she doesn't know. And when she asks if he's going on a trip, he says yes, just for work, and she asks if he'll bring her back a stuffed animal like he did last time. He promises he will, even though he's not sure he's coming back at all. After Maya goes to bed, Keisha sits with him on the porch, and they don't talk, They just exist in the same space, breathing the same air, holding hands like they're trying to memorize the shape of each other's fingers. At some point, she asks, "If this goes wrong?" It won't. But if it does, then you take Maya and you disappear. There's money in an account under your name, enough to start over. She doesn't cry. She just squeezes his hand tighter and says, "I don't want to start over. I want you to come home." "I will." But they both know he might be lying, and they both know that love isn't always enough to stop the world from taking what it wants. Jae-sung is walking into a trap, not because he thinks he'll win, but because the cost of not trying is worse than death. And Keisha is letting him go, not because she believes he'll survive, but because stopping him would mean choosing her sister's life over his soul. This is what love looks like when the system comes for you. It's not romantic. It's impossible math and quiet goodbyes and the hope that sacrifice means something.
The hotel choice people chose is in Chimshatsui, near the harbor, and it's the kind of place that's expensive enough to look legitimate, but anonymous enough that no one asks questions. Jae-sung checks in under a fake name, pays cash, and takes the stairs to the 7th floor, because elevators are traps when you're expecting trouble. The room is small and clean, with a view of the harbor that would be beautiful if he could focus on anything other than the meeting in 4 hours. He sits on the edge of the bed and checks his watch, not the cheap digital one he wore in Vietnam, but the old smartwatch he kept hidden in a waterproof bag under the floorboards. It's synced to his heart rate, connected to a server in Switzerland, and programmed with instructions he set up 2 years ago when he first encrypted the files. If his heart stops, or if the watch detects a sustained spike in adrenaline consistent with torture or extreme distress, the files automatically decrypt and upload to a list of journalists, prosecutors, and law enforcement agencies across 3 countries. It's a dead man's switch, crude but effective, and the only leverage he has left. He straps the watch on, feels the faint vibration as it calibrates to his pulse, and thinks about Keisha's face when he left. She didn't cry, but her eyes were red, and she held him at the door for 30 seconds longer than necessary, like she was trying to memorize the weight of him. Maya waved from the window, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, and Jae-sung waved back and promised he'd bring her something from the airport. He doesn't know if he'll keep that promise, but he knows that if he dies tonight, at least he tried to be the man Keisha believed he could be. The meeting is set for 8 p.m. in a private tea room on the hotel's 3rd floor, the kind of space businessmen rent for discreet negotiations. Jae-sung arrives 10 minutes early, not because he's eager, but because being early lets him control the room. He checks the exits, notes the security cameras, counts the number of people in the hallway. There are 2 men in suits standing near the elevator, and they don't look at him directly, but they're definitely watching. He walks into the tea room, and it's smaller than he expected, just a round table, 6 chairs, and a window that overlooks the street. Sung-ho is already there, sitting with his back to the wall, and when he sees Jae-sung, he nods once, but doesn't smile. "You came," Jae-sung says in Korean. "I said I would. I didn't think you'd be stupid enough." Jae-sung sits across from him, and for a moment it's just the 2 of them in the room, and it almost feels like old times, before the collapse, before the betrayals, when they were both just soldiers following orders. But those days are gone, and they both know it. Sung-ho glances at the door. Choi's people will be here in 5 minutes. When they arrive, don't talk unless they ask you a direct question. Don't make threats. Don't act like you're in control. Am I? No. But if you pretend you have nothing to lose, they'll believe you have nothing left. The door opens, and 3 men walk in. The first 2 are enforcers, young, sharp-eyed, the kind who grew up in the organization and learned to kill before they learned to drive. They stand on either side of the door, hands folded in front of them, and they don't sit. The 3rd man is Choi.
He's younger than Jae-sung expected, maybe early 40s, with wireframe glasses and a tailored suit that probably cost more than Jae-sung earned in a year at the boatyard. He looks like a banker or a lawyer, not a gangster, and that's what makes him dangerous. He's the new breed, the ones who understand that real power isn't about fear, it's about information and leverage, and knowing exactly how much pressure to apply before something breaks. Choi sits down, adjusts his glasses, and looks at Jae-sung like a scientist looks at a specimen. "You're thinner than your file photo. Vietnam must agree with you." Jae-sung doesn't respond. Choi smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. "I'll be direct. You have something I need, and I have something you want. Min-so is alive, though not particularly comfortable. You give me the access codes to the Switzerland files, and I release her. Simple transaction? And after that? After that, you disappear. You go back to your fishing village, raise your daughter, grow old with your wife. I don't care what you do as long as you stay invisible." Jae-sung glances at Sung-ho, who's staring at the table like he wishes he were anywhere else. "You're lying." Choi smiles wider. "Of course I am. But you're going to give me the files anyway, because the alternative is watching Min-so's execution on video while your wife listens on speakerphone." Choi leans back in his chair, and his tone shifts, less predator, more recruiter. "But there's a third option. You come back. You work for me. You're still sharp, still connected, and frankly, you understand the old systems better than anyone I have. I'll pay you triple what your uncle did. I'll clear your name with the Chinese. I'll even let Min-so go tonight, no strings attached." Jae-sung's jaw tightens. In exchange for what? In exchange for the files, and for leaving Keisha. The room goes silent. Even the enforcers shift slightly, like they didn't expect Choi to say it so plainly. Choi adjusts his glasses again. "She's your weakness. You know it. I know it. You ran halfway across the world for her, burned every bridge you had, turned your back on power most men would kill for. That's not love. That's dependency, and dependent men make bad decisions. She's not a weakness. Then why are you here? Why are you negotiating with me instead of killing me? Because 6 years ago, the Jae-sung I read about in the files would have put a bullet in my head the moment I threatened someone he cared about. But you didn't. You came to talk. You came to beg." Choi leans forward, and his voice drops to something almost kind. "I'm offering you a way out. You give me the files, you walk away from the woman who's made you soft, and you get your life back. Real power, real respect. You won't have to sand boats or count motorbikes or pretend you're someone you're not." "And if I say no?" Choi's smile disappears. "Then Min-so dies in the next 30 minutes, and I spend the next 6 months dismantling everyone you've ever loved until you're begging me to kill you too." Jae-sung looks at his watch. His heart rate is elevated but steady, 138 beats per minute, just below the threshold that would trigger the dead man's switch. He takes a slow breath, and when he speaks, his voice is calm, almost detached. "You're right about one thing. 6 years ago, I would have killed you. I would have walked in here with a gun, shot you in the face, and burned this building down on my way out. And maybe I would have survived, maybe not, but I would have won, because that's the only language I spoke." He stands up slowly, and the enforcers tense, but he doesn't reach for a weapon. He just raises his wrist and shows Choi the watch. "But I don't speak that language anymore. The woman you call my weakness taught me something you'll never understand. Real power isn't about who you can crush. It's about how much you're willing to lose. And I'm willing to lose everything." Choi frowns. "What are you talking about?" Jae-sung taps the watch. "This is connected to my heart rate. If I die, if you torture me, if my pulse stays above 160 for more than 2 minutes, the Switzerland files automatically decrypt and upload to every prosecutor and journalist on a list I made 2 years ago. Your names, your accounts, your politicians, Everything. Choi's face doesn't change, but his hands stop moving. You're bluffing. Maybe, but are you willing to bet your empire on it? The room is silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Sung-ho is staring at Jae-sung like he's seeing him for the first time. The enforcers are looking at Choi, waiting for orders. Choi takes off his glasses, cleans them slowly with a cloth from his pocket, and puts them back on. If you release those files, you destroy yourself too. Every crime you committed, every person you killed, it's all in there. I know. Your wife will find out who you really were. I know. And you're willing to live with that? I'm willing to die with it. The question is, are you? Choi stares at him for a long time, and Jae-sung can see the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing the risk, measuring the odds, trying to find an angle. But there isn't one, because the only way to win against someone who's willing to lose everything is to be willing to lose more, and Choi has too much to protect. Finally, Choi stands. You have 48 hours to leave Hong Kong. If I see you again, the deal is off. And Min-so? She'll be released tonight. Sung-ho will confirm it. Choi walks to the door, pauses, and looks back. You think you won, but all you did was buy time. Sooner or later, that watch will stop working, and when it does, I'll be waiting. He leaves. The enforcers follow. And Jae-sung stands there alone with Sung-ho, his hands shaking, his heart rate finally starting to drop. You're insane, Sung-ho says, shaking his head. Maybe. That watch, does it actually work? Jae-sung looks at him and almost smiles. Guess we'll never know. Jae-sung didn't win by being stronger or smarter or more violent. He won because he understood what Keisha taught him, that real power is the willingness to sacrifice everything, including yourself. But the cost of that power is uncertainty. He doesn't know if the files will stay buried, he doesn't know if Choi will keep his word, and he doesn't know if Keisha will forgive him when she learns the truth. He's alive, but he's not free. Not yet. Jae-sung doesn't sleep on the plane back to Vietnam. He sits in the middle seat of economy, wedged between a businessman who snores and a college student watching movies on her phone, and he stares at the seatback screen without seeing it. His watch is still on his wrist, still tracking his pulse, and every few minutes he glances at it to make sure it's working, to make sure he's still real. Sung-ho called 3 hours after the meeting to confirm Min-so had been released at a subway station in Seoul, shaken but unharmed, and that Choi's people had backed off. For now. The words "for now" hang in Jae-sung's mind like a countdown he can't see, and he knows this isn't over. It's just paused, and the pause could end any day without warning. But that's not what keeps him awake. What keeps him awake is the question of what he'll say to Keisha when he gets home, because the truth is, he didn't win in Hong Kong. He just delayed the cost. The files are still out there, still encrypted, still a weapon pointed at everyone he loves, and sooner or later, that weapon will go off. His ribs ache where one of Choi's men shoved him against the wall on his way out of the hotel. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to leave a message. His knuckles are bruised from gripping the armrest too tight during takeoff, and there's a shallow cut above his left eye from where he walked into a doorframe in the hotel hallway because his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't see straight. He's not wounded the way soldiers get wounded in movies. There's no bullet holes, no dramatic scars, but he's broken in a quieter way, the kind that doesn't show up on x-rays, but makes it hard to breathe when he thinks about what could have gone wrong. It's late afternoon when Jae-sung gets back to the village, and the first thing he sees is Maya sitting on the front steps with her rabbit, waiting. She's wearing the yellow dress Keisha made for her last month, and when she sees him get out of the taxi, she runs toward him so fast she almost trips, and he catches her and lifts her even though his ribs scream in protest. "You're back!" she says in English, her accent still thick but her smile pure, and she wraps her arms around his neck so tight he can barely breathe. "Did you bring me a present?" He did. A small stuffed panda from the Hong Kong airport, mass-produced and overpriced, but she holds it like it's treasure and kisses his cheek and runs back inside to show Keisha. Keisha is standing in the doorway, and she's watching him in that way she has, not saying anything, just taking him in, cataloging the details, the cut above his eye, the way he's holding his left side, the exhaustion in his posture that wasn't there 3 days ago. She doesn't ask if he's okay. She just steps aside to let him in, and when he passes her, she touches his arm briefly, a small gesture that means, "I'm glad you're alive," and "we'll talk later," and "I was terrified," all at once. They eat together that night, rice, grilled fish, vegetables from the market, and Maya talks the entire time about a field trip her class took to a temple and how she learned to fold paper cranes and wants to make 100 of them so she can make a wish. Jae-sung nods and asks questions and pretends everything is normal, but Keisha barely touches her food, and every time he looks up, she's watching him in an expression he can't quite read. After dinner, Keisha puts Maya to bed, and Jae-sung sits on the back porch with a beer he doesn't really want. The ocean is close enough that he can hear the waves, and the sound used to calm him, but tonight it just sounds like static. Keisha comes out 20 minutes later with a first aid kit and sits next to him without asking permission. She opens the kit, pulls out antiseptic and gauze, and gestures for him to turn toward her. "Let me see," she says quietly. He hesitates, then lifts his shirt. The bruise on his ribs is dark purple, spreading from his sternum to his side, and when she presses gently, he flinches. She doesn't apologize, she just keeps working, her fingers methodical and sure, and he realizes that this is the same way she healed him 2 years ago in her clinic when he couldn't perform and thought he was broken beyond repair. Back then, she healed something in him that wasn't physical. Tonight, the roles are reversed. She cleans the cut above his eye next, dabbing it with alcohol-soaked cotton, and he hisses at the sting but doesn't pull away. Her face is inches from his, close enough that he can see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the gray hair she hasn't bothered to dye, the way her jaw tightens when she's trying not to cry. "What happened?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave them what they wanted." "Did you?" He doesn't answer immediately, because the truth is complicated. He gave them a version of surrender, a promise that the files would stay buried as long as they left his family alone, but he didn't give them control. He kept the dead man's switch. He kept the leverage, which means the threat isn't gone, just dormant. "I bought us time," he finally says. "I don't know how much." Keisha finishes bandaging the cut and sits back, her hands still holding the gauze like she forgot it's there. Min-so called this morning. She's safe. She said a man dropped her off at a subway station in Seoul and told her to go home and forget everything. She's scared, but she's alive. "Good. She asked about you. She wanted to know if you were the reason she was taken." Jae-sung looks at the floor. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were the reason she was released." He doesn't know if that's true, but he's grateful she said it. Keisha sets the gauze aside and takes his hands in hers, and her palms are warm and steady, and for the first time in 3 days he feels like he's not falling. "You're shaking," she says. "I know. Are you afraid?" "I don't know what I am." They sit like that for a long time, not talking, just breathing in the same rhythm. Eventually, Keisha asked, "Did you have to kill anyone?" "No." "Did you want to?" He thinks about Choi's face, about the way he called Keisha a weakness, about how easy it would have been to reach across that table and prove him wrong in the most violent way possible. "Yes." "But you didn't." "No." "Why?" He looks at her, and he's not sure how to explain it. How, in that hotel room, with Choi offering him his old life back and calling love a liability, he realized that the only thing separating him from the monster he used to be was the choice to walk away. Not because he was weak, but because Keisha taught him that strength isn't about how much damage you can do, it's about how much damage you refuse to do, even when it costs you everything. "Because you asked me not to," he says simply. Keisha's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't let them fall. "I know what those files are. I know what you did to get them, and I know that as long as they exist, we'll never be completely safe." "I know." "So what do we do?" "We live," he says. "We wake up every morning and we live like the threat isn't there. We raise Maya, we work, We love each other, and if the day comes when they come back, we deal with it then. That's not a plan. It's the only one I have. She leans her head against his shoulder and he wraps his arm around her, even though it hurts his ribs, and they sit there on the porch while the ocean keeps moving and the village keeps sleeping and the world keeps turning like nothing happened. But something did happen. Jae-sung went to Hongtong as a man running from his past, and he came back as a man carrying it. The difference is now he knows the weight and he's choosing to carry it anyway. Later that night, after Keisha falls asleep, Jae-sung stands in the bathroom and looks at himself in the mirror. The cut above his eye is bandaged. The bruise on his ribs is hidden under his shirt. But the real damage is in his eyes. There's a tiredness there that wasn't there before, a knowledge that innocence once lost can never be fully recovered. He thinks about the man he was 6 years ago, the one who could make people disappear with a phone call, who measured his worth in fear and respect and power. That man is gone, but he's not sure what's taken his place. He takes off the smartwatch and holds it in his palm. The screen is dark, the heart rate monitor inactive, but the threat it represents is still real. He could destroy it. He could throw it in the ocean and let the files stay buried forever. But that would mean giving up the only leverage he has, and leverage is the only thing keeping his family safe. So he puts it back on. He straps it to his wrist, feels the faint vibration as it sinks to his pulse, and he makes a silent promise to the man in the mirror. I'll carry this as long as I have to. I'll carry it until it kills me or until I find another way. But I won't let it turn me back into what I was. He turns off the light and goes to bed, and when he lies down next to Keisha, she shifts in her sleep and drapes her arm across his chest, right over the bruise, and the pain is sharp but grounding. He's alive. He's broken, but his soul, for the first time in years, feels intact. Jae-sung survived, but survival isn't the same as victory. He's wounded in ways that won't heal with bandages, carrying scars that will never fully fade. But Keisha is still here. Maya is still safe. And for now, that's enough. The question that lingers is, how long can you carry the weight of your past before it crushes you? And is love strong enough to hold you up when it does? Jae-sung wakes up before sunrise, like he always does. But this time, it's not because of paranoia or habit. It's because his body won't let him sleep anymore. The bruise on his ribs throbs with every breath, and the cut above his eye itches under the bandage. And when he tries to shift his weight, Keisha stars beside him and mumbles something in sleep that sounds like his name. He lies there for a few minutes, listening to her breathe, watching the way the early light filters through the curtains and makes patterns on the wall. This is the life he chose. This small room, this quiet woman, this village that doesn't know his real name or what he's done. And for the first time since Hong Kong, he feels something close to peace. But peace is fragile, and he knows it won't last. He gets up slowly, trying not to wake her, and walks to the kitchen. The house is still dark except for the glow of the streetlight outside, and he stands at the window for a long time, watching the empty road, counting the seconds between passing motorbikes, looking for threats that aren't there. The Nokia is still on the counter where he left it 3 days ago. He picks it up, turns it over in his hands, and thinks about throwing it away. But throwing it away won't change what it represents. The connection to soul, the debt he can't fully repay, the violence that's still one phone call away from returning. So, he opens the back, removes the SIM card, and breaks it in half. Then he drops the pieces in the trash and covers them with coffee grounds so he won't be tempted to dig them out later. It's a small gesture, meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but it feels like progress. Maya wakes up an hour later, her hair messy and her stuffed panda tucked under one arm, and she climbs into Jae-sung's lap while he's sitting at the table drinking tea. She doesn't ask about the bandage on his face or why he's moving so carefully. She just leans her head against his chest and hums a song she learned at school, something about birds and clouds and flying. Keisha makes breakfast, rice porridge with ginger and scallions, and they eat together in comfortable silence. the kind of silence that only happens when people know each other well enough that words aren't always necessary. Maya talks about wanting to learn to swim, and Keisha promises to take her to the beach next weekend, and Jae-sung nods along and realizes that this is what he was fighting for in Hong Kong. Not survival, not safety, not even justice. Just this. Ordinary mornings with people he loves. After breakfast, Keisha takes Maya to school, and Jae-sung is left alone in the house with his thoughts. He could go to the boatyard, pretend everything is normal, sand wood until his hands are too tired to shake, but he doesn't. Instead, he walks to the bedroom and opens the closet, pushes aside the clothes, and pulls out a small fireproof lockbox he keeps hidden under a loose floorboard. Inside the box are three things: $10,000 in cash, a USB drive with encrypted backups of the Switzerland files, and his old passport. The passport is South Korean, issued 8 years ago, and the photo inside shows a younger version of himself. Harder eyes, sharper jaw, the expression of a man who thought power was something you took instead of something you earned. His real name is printed below the photo in Hangul, and he stares at it for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to be that person. He can't. That person is gone. Jae-sung takes the passport to the backyard, where there's a small metal drum they use for burning trash. He crumples up some old newspaper, lights it with a match, and watches the flames catch. Then he holds the passport over the fire, hesitating for just a moment, because once he does this, there's no going back. But going back was never an option. He drops the passport into the flames and watches it curl and blacken, the photo warping and melting, his real name disappearing into ash. The fire smells like chemicals and regret, and he stands there until the passport is completely gone, until there's nothing left but smoke and the faint outline of what used to be. He doesn't feel liberated. He doesn't feel reborn. He just feels tired, like he's been carrying something heavy for so long that he forgot what it was like to stand up straight. But he also feels something else, something quieter and harder to name. Not hope, exactly, but the possibility of hope. The idea that maybe, just maybe, he can be someone other than the man in that passport. Someone without a name, without a past, and without the weight of all the things he's done. Someone who just exists in the present, in this village, with this family. Keisha comes home while he's still standing there, and she sees the smoke and the ash and the look on his face, and she doesn't ask what he burned. She just walks over and stands next to him, close enough that their shoulders touch, and together they watch the last of the flames die out. "Are you okay?" she asks after a while. "I don't know," he says honestly, "but I think I will be." She takes his hand, and her fingers are warm and steady, and they stand there in the backyard while the sun climbs higher and the village wakes up around them. The days that follow are ordinary in the best possible way. Jae-sung goes back to work at the boatyard, and his boss doesn't ask about the bandage or why he was gone, just hands him a piece of sandpaper and points at a hull that needs smoothing. The work is repetitive and mindless, and that's exactly what he needs. Hours of focusing on something simple and tangible, something that has a clear beginning and end. Keisha goes back to her clinic, treating fishermen with infected cuts and children with fevers, and sometimes Jae-sung stops by during his lunch break just to watch her work. There's something beautiful about the way she moves, efficient but gentle, confident but never arrogant, and he realizes that this is what real power looks like, not the ability to hurt people, but the ability to heal them. Maya starts swimming lessons at the community center, and every evening Jae-sung and Keisha sit on the beach and watch her splash around in the shallow water, her laughter carrying across the sand. She's getting braver, venturing a little deeper each day, and Jae-sung thinks about how children are fearless in ways adults can never be again, how they trust the world won't hurt them even when the world has every reason to prove them wrong. At night, after Maya is asleep, Jae-sung and Keisha sit on the porch and talk about small things, what to have for dinner tomorrow, whether they should repaint the shutters, if they should get a dog. They don't talk about Hong Kong or Choi or the files or what happens if the dead man's switch fails. They just exist together. And that's enough. The smartwatch stays on his wrist, a constant reminder of the threat that's still out there, but Jae-sung has learned to live with it the way you learn to live with chronic pain, not by ignoring it, but by accepting it as part of the landscape. He checks the Switzerland server every few days just to make sure the files are still encrypted, still secure. The green checkmark is always there, steady and unblinking, and he's not sure if that comforts him or terrifies him. But he keeps checking anyway, because vigilance is the price of the life he's chosen. 3 weeks after Hong Kong, Jae-sung is walking home from the boatyard when he sees a black sedan parked near the market. His heart rate spikes immediately, 138, 145, 152, and his hand moves instinctively to his waistband, even though he's not carrying a weapon. But then the driver gets out, and it's just a tourist asking for directions to the beach, and Jae-sung's heart rate slowly drops back to normal. He realizes he'll probably do this for the rest of his life, jump at shadows, count strangers, check locks twice. The paranoia won't ever fully leave, the scars won't ever fully heal. But that's okay, because scars are just proof that you survived something that tried to kill you. When he gets home, Keisha and Maya are in the kitchen making dumplings, their hands covered in flour, and Maya runs over to show him the misshapen dumpling she made that looks more like a blob than anything edible. He tells her it's perfect, and she beams with pride, and Keisha looks at him over Maya's head and smiles in a way that says, "We're going to be okay." And maybe they will be. Maybe the threat will never come back. Maybe Choi will keep his word. Maybe the files will stay buried forever. Or maybe none of that will happen. Maybe one day the phone will ring, or a stranger will knock on the door, or the green checkmark will turn red, and everything will collapse again. But right now, in this moment, with flour on his daughter's face, and his wife's hand on his shoulder, and the smell of dumplings filling the kitchen, Jae-sung is not afraid. Because true power isn't about who you can crush. It's about who you're willing to be crushed for. And he's finally found something worth protecting, even if it costs him everything. He is no longer Jae-sung. He is no longer the enforcer, the killer, the man in the passport photo with cold eyes and a colder heart. He is just a father, a husband, a man with no name and a full heart. And for the first time in his life, that's enough. If you've ever loved someone so much that you'd burn your whole life down to keep them safe, if you've ever stood between the people you care about and a world that wanted to destroy them, if you've ever chosen to be broken so someone else could stay whole, then you understand. This isn't a story about winning, it's a story about what you're willing to lose. Stay with us, subscribe to the family, because the people who protect others, the ones who carry the weight so no one else has to, they're the ones who change the world one quiet sacrifice at a time.